off, and
So they were taking you where? To a
we're
to a
trying to
prison
get
cell?
through a POW camp.
They were going to take you to a
Yeah,
POW camp.
but where they were gonna take us first, because we are airmen, they were gonna take us to Durlagluft, which is the famous interrogation center.
Okay,
It
okay,
used to be at Frankfurt, but the Americans were getting closer.
Okay.
And they kept pulling back. So they pulled back to Nuremberg,
okay,
and that's where they were taking us to be interrogated.
Okay.
But they only interrogated airmen. We were back here, nice sheets, listening to radios, reading the papers. We had current knowledge. The poor guy up in the front, in the trenches, they didn't know
Yeah,
nothing except
right,
charge or
right,
what their sergeant was
right.
telling them. And they had been gone for, out in the field for 30, 40 days before they even got a rest period. When they did, they didn't get any papers, no newspaper.
Mm-hmm. Right,
They
right.
knew nothing.
right,
But even when they captured them, they would not interrogate them. For that reason,
Right.
they didn't have any current information.
Right.
But for every airman, he wound up and they were interrogated.
So were you interrogated?
Well, I was interrogated, yeah.
Wow.
And then from there was a POW camp just south of Nuremberg. But I was interrogated in Nuremberg where they were at, and then they sent me down to the prison camp, which is about 10 miles away. But there was, mobs of us there, and, and cells and whatnot. Matter of fact, I ran into one of the guys who was in my class who had been shot down just about a week later, Lincoln Hudson. And I said, Lincoln, Harold, is that you? Yeah, it's me. He had been just beaten almost to death. I mean, I could hardly recognize him. He had been beaten so badly. And he had two guards with him. And the civilians came up. The two guards just let the civilians take them, just walked off and stood off here to the side while the civilians did what they wanted to do. And he said they kept beating him, so he just played dead, and they stomped them, and they finally went off, and assuming that he was either dead or close to it or something. And then the two guards came in, picked him up and whatnot, and drug him off. Now, he could still walk barely, but he was just lying there pretending, hey, I'm all out of it. And then when I saw him, which was just about maybe 2.5 days after his plane had been hit and he had to bail out. And, he was just a horrible mess. I remember seeing Lincoln. Lincoln was from Chicago, and he left the military early, and after the war was over, and down in Tuskegee, we used to fly back and forth to Chicago because it was now a training base, and we were instructors, and we could get airplanes for the weekend. And we would always take off because a couple of guys was from Chicago, and we had friends up in Chicago, and that's where young kids, that's where all the action
Right,
is,
right.
up in Chicago.
Yeah.
And we used to fly up Chicago, not every weekend, but about at least once a month or so. We get a couple of airplanes, we fly up to Chicago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you made it out. So how long
Yeah.
were you captive?
The last 2 months of the war, roughly.
Wow.
Actually, it was less than that.
Okay.
But we were there in Nuremberg. We had 10,000 prisoners. The Red Cross really kept all the POWs alive. They had food parcels, and the International Red Cross could get in on the food parcels. And they were able to get in almost one parcel a week.
Wow.
And the Germans let them in because they didn't have any food, and they would take food from the parcels. So they didn't argue. Yeah, they take all the,
I'm
and-
surprised they
Yeah.
even let you have any of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, once they did the refer for that, they would stop bringing them in because word would
Oh.
have gotten out.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Hey, they aren't letting the POWs eat. And but once a day, they would give you something called a big tub of soup and one loaf of bread. And I mean, this bread was just like bricks. Matter of fact, they would stack them up like bricks and then throw a big tarp over them. And that's how they would store them. It was black bread, about yay big, and you organize yourself in groups of 7. And incidentally, it's interesting because 2 of my classmates who came over with me at the same time, who P40, early, whatnot, Isles and Hockaday, Both of us were all in the 99. They were shot down on the 25th of February, both of them.
Oh, my God.
One of them by Hockaday. They don't know what happened to Hockaday. They assume that he was killed. And they were on a strafing mission. Isles assumed that Hockaday was on his way home, even though his plane was badly damaged. Shortly on another run, right after he saw Hockaday, he was on a strafing run and he got hit. So he breaks off. His airplane is still flying and he's trying to get to Switzerland. Because if you get to Switzerland, you couldn't get out, but you lived in a big, beautiful hotel at the guests of the Swiss, but they couldn't let you go. But the Swiss was neutral. So the Germans couldn't have you, and you couldn't go home. And they could live the good life
Wow.
in Switzerland. So when I saw Isles, he said, Harold, I almost had Switzerland made, and my plane quit on me. I crash landed it. I jumped out of it, and I could see the Swiss guns were saying, run, run. And the Germans on this side started shooting at me. And he says, I'll never make it, and they'll blow me out of the sky, because they were shooting at. And he stops, holds up his hands, but he came that close.
Wow.
He winds up in Nuremberg. They take me down to the compound. The compound could hold, big wire fence, and they got all these sub-fences, compound fences around it. They take me down, and they put me in that compound with Isles. Just by chance, happenstance, because they couldn't
Yeah.
care less.
Yeah.
2 goes here, you go to the next one, 2 goes here, and whatnot. And I was just there, and just as I walked in, there was Isles hanging on the fence, because everybody say, hey, prisoners coming, and they're looking to see if they know anybody. It's almost like a homecoming.
Right.
So I go in, Isles. He said, Harold, old buddy. We graduated together. After graduation, he and I and 3 other guys, we went to Chicago together on our way home. So we had 7 days leave. He was on his way to a town close to Chicago. So we stayed in Chicago for 1 day, punks, drinking and whatnot. Next day I went to Minneapolis, and he was married. He was about 5 years older than I was. And he had a wife who he met that night, and because he said, hey, I'll meet you in Chicago. We're all going out to a nightclub, and we went out celebrating, and I got a picture of all of us sitting
how
there
neat.
and whatnot. And I wound up in the same prison camp with him. We stayed together our entire time
my
as a
gosh.
POW, and
Wow.
just pure luck,
Yeah.
pure luck, and wind up with a classmate that
Wow.
you went overseas with.
What a story. What a story.
But they would organize you, and I am taking up an awful lot of your time. They would organize us in groups of 7. It was 7 men to a loaf of bread. The older guys who had been there had taken, you saved everything as a Creaky, a Creek of Funkin'. We were all Creakies, shorten up the word a bit, Creakies.
So what does it mean? Kriegi-
Prisoner of war.
Oh, Kriegi.
The best I can pronounce
Okay.
it is Greek phenomenon. I'm going to have to let Marcia say the word.
Okay.
A Kriegi was a Kriegsgefangener.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Okay.
If I got all of the
All right.
little words in there. But you were a prisoner or someone in jail
Okay.
or whatever it meant. But you were a Kriegi, you were in jail, you were in a POW camp.
Okay.
And so they had, and the guys who had been there a long time, you get tins and whatnot, and then it's amazing the little utensil these guys, they saved everything, and how they could take these tins, flatten them out, and sharpen them, make small knives out of them. It was just, it's amazing how ingenious, the ingenuity pours out of everybody. Give them that kind of desperate situation, give them a few tins, and they'll figure out how to use it. So you didn't throw away anything. So we're lined up, a little loaf of bread comes in. So let's say it is Isles' day to cut, because you change cutters every day. Every day, 7 days a week, you have a new cutter. So you huddle around your little piece of bread about this high, this wide, about so big. So Isles would take one of the makeshift knives that the guys had, and he would line up. He says, okay, is everybody happy? Can I cut on this line? Yeah, okay, now keep the knife straight, cut it straight, nice and straight now. Get it, he cut it, he take his, and he take all of the crumbs that go along with it.
Wow.
Until you get 7 pieces, you get your piece of loaf, all the crumbs that go along with it. And they
Which
would-
tastes like a brick.
Oh, that man alive. And I loved that black bread.
Wow.
Oh, my God. Manna for heaven. Absolutely.
Wow.
And every day at noon, they would bring in this great big tub into your compound. And that was for the whole compound. And you would keep these little tins and things as cups and, bowls eat out of, some of the larger tins. And Isles had a couple of tins, so he gave me one of his tins. He even gave me he had 2 or 3 pair of socks, gave me one of his pair of socks that he had picked up a little earlier from somebody, I don't know who.
Uh-huh.
So you go up to your little thing of tin, and they have one scoop, and they give you one full scoop, because the tins and cups were all various sizes. One full scoop out of the pot of it. And it looked almost like water. Occasionally, you might see a few little things in it that appears like vegetables. You can pretend, but it's essentially hot water.
Wow.
I got to tell you, the Americans were getting close, so they had to evacuate us. So I wasn't there no more than about 2 weeks maximum
There is where?
in the prison camp
Oh,
in
okay.
Nuremberg.
Okay.
The people were getting close, they had to evacuate us. So they evacuated all 10,000 of us. They had us in groups of 200. And it was interesting because obviously from flying, we have reconnaissance planes. They must have known that, hey, what are they doing with all these POWs? Well, they must be moving them inward. So they started actually looking for large groups and whatnot. So it was apparent that, yeah, there's a large group of POWs, Don't accidentally kill them, shoot them up, whatnot. And then you would get to, you get out of the city, you're in the countryside. There's a country home here, a big farm here. And we loved it, not being in that prison camp, even though we're walking a pretty day in the sunshine outside. You got a couple of guards, guarding each 200 men. And hey, we loved it. Wasn't behind that barbed wire.
See, okay.
And so you would walk for about 50 minutes, and you rest for 10 minutes. Then you walk. And then you would get to an area where there are several big farms, and they would put you 200 here with a couple of guards, a little, maybe 100 yards, 50 yards, whatever. This group of 200 right on the hillside with a couple of guards. And before you left, you had one blanket. They gave you the blanket at your little bunk. They have bunks, a bed,
Okay.
which had nothing but boards on it, and they give you a blanket. And they say, hey, that's it. On this march, take care of your blanket, because you aren't going to get another one. And that's
Wow.
it. So we left with our own blankets and whatnot. So we slept under the stars on our own blankets, and the Red Cross was still able to get in one food parcel to us. So usually, you would break up in groups, or there was, Isles and I was by ourselves. So we said, well, ours, why don't we share ours? And these 3 guys, hey, got to know them. Hey, we'll share ours. And these 2 guys would share theirs. Because if you open up a can of something, you didn't need it all. Or if you were smart, you wouldn't attempt to eat it all. Because you better parcel this off so it lasts a while. So with 2 of you can open up 1 can of meat, you cut it in half, and you got your half, you might have had a half a slice of bread left over, and, this is how you, and they had, everything, little tins of a variety of foods. They always had Spam in them.
So I've heard.
And the guy said, we're prisoners of war, and we still got Spam. But only this time they loved it. And there's no equivalent about it. And little cans of vegetables. They always had cigarettes in them. And essentially I said, somebody ought to sue the government, because the government started them smoking. And they encouraged it and gave them free cigarettes.
Yep.
They sure felt that I got lung cancer,
Yeah.
And everyone smoked.
Yep.
Everybody smoked. I never smoked in my life. Isles never smoked. We take the cigarettes, and I looked like a little baby. The farmhouses, Isles, and a couple of other guys would join in and say, hey, well, Harold's pretty good at this. So they would give me, the 4 of us, all of the cigarettes. And I'd go up there with my little baby face pounding the door, haben Sie Brot for cigarettes, zapatos, and I knew a few other words, that was the vegetables. Zapatos was bread. I used to know onions, but whatever.
So you'd barter with your
Oh,
cigarettes?
yeah, and I would hold them the cigarettes. And sometimes they would say, no, 9. Other times they would say, yeah, and they would come up with a half a loaf of bread, and I'd give them the cigarettes. But I was pretty good, and I would
Yeah.
usually come back with something. One time I went up and the same routine, and this little old lady, she couldn't have been more than 4 feet tall, and she looked like she was 100 years old, could hardly walk. And so I tell her, haben Sie bread, zapato, something, for cigarettes, And she looked at it, and she said a few words with German, and she speaks in German, and I say nine, and shrug my shoulders, nine, and she's just talking in German, and she came up to me just as sweet as she could be and looked me right square in the eyes and looked at my face and whatnot. And then she touched my face just as nice and tenderly, and she was talking and stroking my face. And I said, oh, I just wish I could understand what she was saying, and I could respond. I assumed that she had never seen a black guy before. I'm almost certain that was the case. And she was stroking my face. I don't know, maybe she was wiping to see if it would come off. I don't know. But she was so sweet. And then she motioned to me with her hand, and I know she was saying, wait a minute, because from the way, the expression of her face. So I was standing there, and she goes in the back. She comes back with a little sack. She had almost a full loaf of bread in that little sack. She had several potatoes. There was a couple of onions in there, and there was a chunk of ham in it. And gave it to me, and I'm taking, take the cigarettes. No, please, take the cigarettes. No. So I came back, and on this one, all I had was my cigarettes and aisle cigarettes, we were only two, just by chance that we went along on that one. We didn't have more people joining us. So I came back, look at this aisle. I was looking, he says, my God, potato, onion, and they said, look, I said, shh, don't talk too loud. Don't talk too loud. We better not let these other guys know we got to keep their mouth shut, So we got our little stash, man. And we only ate off of, so no, we took
Oh
these
my gosh.
usually at night and whatnot. Well, I know we would have had to offer, say, hey, we can't say no. If a guy says, oh, geez, can I have a piece? How can we say no to him? But hey, this
What
is
they don't know
survival.
won't hurt 'em.
This is survival.